Hi everybody, today we're going to be talking about the interviewing process, so we're going to get a better understanding of what it is, how it works. So you typically, for the interview process, it starts with the screening stage where we're going to separate out, who's actually qualified for the job. So you just start briefly screening out, and then there's the selection stage where you're going to pick your top qualifiers. And then after the top qualifiers is potentially where you would receive the job offer. Sometimes to keep in mind with this, it's not as easy as the whole 1, 2, 3, this is how it works. Sometimes it takes multiple interviews. Sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes months, sometimes it's just a few days. You could go through several different interviews. You could go through phone interviews, in-person interviews, and then potentially even another interview on top of that, because sometimes you go into secondary rounds and things of that nature. There's the different types of interviews. You'll have structured interviews, which is your typical predetermined questions, and then they just kind of compare candidates based off of those questions. That's typically, like at my work, what we do for what we call the flex timers. So they're part-timers or typically college students. We just have a series of 10 questions, and we just kind of try to get a feel for them the best we can, because for a lot of them it's their first job, so there's not a lot of experience, and we're just going kind of based off of their schooling or things like that. There's unstructured, which is where you adapt to the questions based on the responses that you're getting. It can really feel like a conversation, and sometimes in interviews, when you're trying to really get a feel for someone or to get them to open up, they'll utilize unstructured. There's the panel and group. The panel is when you're going to be interviewed by several people. Sometimes it's the manager of the position plus their manager and maybe the manager of that floor. I use that example because in my first job, I actually was on I was interviewed by a panel. It can be very intimidating, but it went well. But it is interesting. The group interviewing is when there's going to be multiple candidates and just kind of, one person. Then there'll be situation, working, or behavior interviews. So sometimes they'll give you hypothetical situations, and what would you do if if this happened to you? How would you handle this situation? I know when I was getting into the manager role, that was kind of what they did, and it's definitely puts you to the test. Then they'll try to put you in stressful situations, things like that, to just see how you handle it, awkward silences, things like that. Then there's the work situations. So they try to give you a real life situation and just put you in that situation and see how you do. There's different type of media that we'll use. So there's phone interviews, emails, videos. So we're seeing all kinds of different ways to use things. Phone interviews, they use a lot of times for your first screening. And so they'll just have you, they'll ask some questions over the phone, see how that goes, and then potentially set up an in-person interview. There's email, and the email is utilized sometimes just for some back and forth kind of questions and things. And then there's video, so sometimes you're not necessarily in the same town or same state, and so videos such as Skype or whatever will be used for interviews. And then the things that employers are looking for is your preparation, your work experience, and then personality traits. So you have to be fitting for the job. So, when you're applying for jobs, you want to make sure that it's, the jobs that fit you and that you'll do well in and you'll enjoy. And then they also do testing and background checks. So we see a lot of personality tests. I know a lot of times whenever you're applying somewhere, you go through a personality test. There's language tests. We see a lot of drug and alcohol tests. So typically you have to pass those. And then the background checks, which they will run credit reports, criminal history, and just confirm your education and things like that. So hopefully that was helpful and kind of takes you through the whole interview process and you'll be a little more prepared.